Hi, I'm David Roach, and I am the strategist of Quantum Strategy. And why I'm here is because quantum strategy is new and it does things a new way. What we do is we stand at the crossroads, the crossover point of geo-economic events, geopolitical events, and we translate them in everyday language into what it means for you as an investor, for you managing a container ship, and for you as a government institution contemplating different strategies to make a decent defense posture. That's what independent strategy does. We are not the academics of the conferences which take place endlessly on geopolitical themes. We are the people who take the evidence which represents a break with history, like the war in Ukraine, like, for example, as I was saying a moment, the French elections, which are not a continuum of history. We say, like in quantum economics, we say, well, that particular particle of history is not where you think it is. In fact, it can be pretty well anywhere until it actually happens. And we are all about how, where, when, and what it happens, in what form. So that's why we are here. You can get all the details you want about us on our website, which is www.quantumstrategy in one word, either uppercase or lowercase, .org. www.quantumstrategy.org. Doesn't that sound very forbidding and formidable? Now, let me just say as an example what we are considering at the moment and what we are putting on the website. The French elections are really important. They are important because, for the reasons that we describe in our recent report, Le Donut Français, the French donut, what is happening in France is that the center ground has been nuked by the foolishness of Macron calling an election at about the most inauspicious time that he could. So the populists are going to take over the center ground. It doesn't really matter, except for fiscal spending, to a degree, whether it is le Front Populaire or le Renouvellement National of Marine Le Pen. It will be extremist. It will mean that France will be internally focused on conflict for the next 5 years, while Macron stays in office and has no operative form of government, certainly not the operative form of government which was once known as cohabitation. Now, why does this matter? It matters for another reason. That is, Germany is paralyzed. 70% of German people think that Scholz is a natural-born loser. That 30% of German people support the ruling coalition. In any normal political process, that would mean the fall of the government and the appointment or election of another government. But in Germany, it does not, because the German Grundgesetz, which is the basic constitution, is founded on the principle that we will have no more jittery, fast-track elections, which can lead to the avenue of power being opened for the sort of people we don't want to see in power. That was history. So you can't knock out a German chancellor, a German ruling coalition, unless they actually decide to go. And it is most unlikely that they will decide to go, because they are currently in the best jobs they are ever likely to have, given their level of incompetence. So Germany is paralyzed. Then there is a third layer, which is the layer of the European Parliament. Now, oddly, despite the rise of the AfD, the populists in Germany, Le Front National in France, and of course, the newly born Front Populaire in France, despite their rise, the EU parliamentary election was actually quite sedate and orderly. And it established the traditional parties at the center of the spectrum were reaffirmed in their control of the European Parliament, at least in theory. Their next job is to appoint a European Commission, which is the executive, which actually runs the shop and gets things done. But it can only get things done through a party called, through an institution called the Conseil Européen, the European Council, which represents and is full of the ministers of various countries, the ministers being of various types, depending on what critical bit of legislation at the EU level is being considered and has been put forward by the Parliament and thought up by the executive, by the European Commission. Now, here's the problem. Europe has been sliding backwards on the global scale by really any measure. Its productivity, for example, over the last 7 years lags the US by 1.3%, despite all the new generation plans that were supposed to be implemented in the EU. There are at least 7 pillars of vital reform coming up in the European Union. That includes the integration of Ukraine and the Baltic states. It includes the reconstruction of Ukraine. It includes the establishment of a complementary military force to NATO in Europe, just in case the Americans ever really opt for isolationism. And it includes a dozen vital needs to rejuvenate European innovation and productivity and state investment, using European rather than national assets to do so. The reality is that Europe is structured the wrong way, whether it's on the supply side around corporations or whether it's on the demand side around, say, consumers. The size of Europe is huge as an aggregate. It is the biggest consumer market in the world. It is the biggest exporter in the world, with exports the size of the United States and China together. But it is put together all wrong. Europe is put together as little national states, and even big national states in Europe, or like France or Germany, are little national states when you put them on the scale of the bigger world states, global states out there today. So all of that needs to change. It needs to change in creating much bigger organizations, which are much more competitive. And it needs to change in terms of empowering the consumer across service markets and product markets in ways which, quite frankly, the single market has started, but not completed. It also speaks to the need for a much more robust financial system, the single banking system, and for the capital unification of capital markets. There are at least 7 things that are essential to reverse the gradual and fast now accelerating decline of Europe. This cannot work if you have at the top of Europe, at the level of the European Parliament, at the level of the Commission, intelligent people in charge who are reading from the same book and pretty well the same chapter. That can work. But if they meet the countervailing forces of populism at the base of the European Union, whether that populism be of a kind of fiscally irresponsible type or even a violent type, or whether they meet the populism of paralysis, which is clear in Germany, all of those political factions, those nefarious political factions, will actually pop up in the Council of Ministers, where, as ministers, they will sit. And because they are there, facing the reasonable factions from the European Parliament, from the European Commission, the result will be paralysis. If there is paralysis, things will not be as they are in the European Union. Europe will be incapable, for example, in geopolitical terms, of confronting Russia successfully. Europe will be incapable of keeping up with the sort of economic welfare which allows democratic states to secure their position on the world stage in terms of geopolitics, or perhaps more important, geoeconomics. That is why what is coming up in France in terms of the elections are very, very important. And in a broader sense, this is why quantum strategy is there to help you think about such things. Thank you.